Hudson's Urban Renewal 50 Years Later by Ted Hilscher. I'm Brenda Schufelden, I'm the History Room Coordinator, and it has been a long time since there's been a room full of people for the History Room. So we're very excited. Urban Renewal transformed Front Street and the blocks between Columbia and State Street, west of 2nd Street. Demolition and the subsequent new construction took place between 1970 and 1972. Ted Hilscher, Professor Emeritus of History at Columbia Green Community College, will show and discuss approximately 50 photographs of buildings no longer standing and streetscapes that no longer exist. These photographs have been made available through a collaborative effort by the late Arthur Cowick, longtime Hudson Planning Commission Chair, and the Columbia Green Community College Library. Ted also will facilitate a discussion on the legacy of urban renewal in Hudson. Anyone with recollections of the impacted areas of the city prior to urban renewal, as well as any of those who wish to talk about how Hudson and its residents were impacted are welcome to comment, to ask questions. Ted in particular is looking forward to the discussion. In addition to his professorship at Columbia Green Community College, Ted Hilscher is a graduate of Hudson High School, has a bachelor's degree in American Studies from Fordham, a master's in United States history from SUNY Albany, a law degree from Albany Law School, and a law practice with his wife in Catskill. This program is part of the library's History Room Local History Series. The History Room houses a collection that pertains to the history of the city of Hudson, Greenport, and Stockport, as well as Columbia County and New York State. We are open Saturdays, 10 to 1, and by appointment. And there are online research requests. That is a free service that we do through the library that are available. You could go to our History Room website at historyroom.hudsonarealibrary.org. So I have a couple of announcements before we begin tonight's program. First of all, the Cowick family, many of whom are here tonight, recently donated the Arthur Cowick Urban Renewal papers. Mr. Cowick's private papers, books, photographs, and scrapbook detailing the planning and execution of urban renewal in Hudson. And we have received a generous donation from a donor who wishes to remain anonymous to have the Cowick papers preserved and archived. And we're going to be doing that in October. They will be available for you to look at by the end of October, and we'll also have some of the collection digitized, and it will be up on New York Heritage. And also some will be on our website. In addition, there's a lot going on with history at the library. We are pleased to announce that the library will shortly launch 2 oral history websites, online archives. The Hudson Area Library Oral History Project, which is an open collection that began in the 2000s, and the Black Legacy Association of Columbia County Oral History Project in partnership with Oral History Summer School. And they are located during the summers in Hudson, and we're going to be networking with their website, which has a lot of oral histories of Hudson residents also. Our next event is one of our 4 yearly Leisler Institute collaborations. It'll be Thursday, October 27th at 6 p.m. Colonial New York as Model for the Nation by Patricia Bonamy. Colonial New York contributed as vital elements to the formation of the United States, and Professor Bonamy will highlight the special significance of New York's religious and racial diversity, its unique geography, and its tumultuous politics. So thank you very much for coming, and now Ted Hilscher.
Thank you for coming. I noticed that there's no clock in this room, so I told Brenda if it gets to be like 9:45, she's gonna, tug on her ear or whatever.
I'll be the only one remaining like that.
Thank you all for coming. So this is, it just worked out this way. This is the 50th anniversary of The construction, back in 1972, Hudson Terrace was being constructed and Bliss Towers was being constructed, and I think finished off in 1973. So we're gonna look at some pictures here, and hopefully by the end of the night we'll have an assessment of what we think the legacy of urban renewal is in Hudson. Hopefully everybody has a map. Does everybody have a two-sided map? So I think this is going to be helpful. It's helpful to me. I didn't grow up in Hudson, so to keep things straight, it's always good to look at a map. If you have the side of the map that says 1873 at the top of the map, that is south of Warren Street, and what you're going to notice is that urban renewal impacted everything west of South Front Street. So between Ferry Street and the mill, there was an old mill on North Front Street. So everything on the west side of Front Street was erased except for Washington Hose, and that's it. So between Ferry Street and the textile mill, I guess it was a textile mill, right?
Yes.
Everything was gone except for Washington Hose and Promenade Hill. So, and you'll see here what's interesting is Fleet Street is gone, Penoyer Street is gone.
Chapel Street.
Well, Chapel Street. So what we're going to do is now we're going to turn your map over, and it says 1873 at the bottom of the map, and then that is north of Warren Street. Everybody with me? And then you'll see, so same thing west of North Front Street, west State Street, west Warren Street don't exist anymore. West Prison Alley, I had to relearn all my alley, the names of all the alleys here, so you're going to have to, those of you native Hudsonians, make sure you keep me straight on names of alleys and anything else that I have to say. And Chapel Street. So on north of Warren Street, it's everything west of 2nd Street from Columbia. Columbia is indicated as Diamond Street on this map from 1873. So north of Diamond Street, all the way to State Street, and then west of 2nd Street. Okay? This collection of slides is, by the way, it's online. It's you can go to New York Heritage. New York Heritage is the platform, and just if you Google Arthur Cowick collection, you'll come to this slide. So you can enjoy these at home. There are captions that go with each of these slides, and I'm going to give you some. Hopefully some information that's going to be in addition to what the captions indicate. So Mr. Cowick and Mr. Cowick's family were longtime operators of the town fair, which was a kids' clothing and furniture and toy store. Mr. Cowick was the longtime chairman of the planning commission in Hudson, and as an adjunct to that, he was the chairman of the Urban Renewal Commission during our period of urban renewal. So Mr. Cowick donated these slides to Columbia Green, and Columbia Green went ahead and posted them on New York Heritage. These slides were not seen for 50 years or close to 50 years. So to me, it was really a treasure trove to be able to look at these pictures one more time, or look at them for the first time. I grew up in Claverick. We went to Mount Carmel Church. My father worked at Gifford Wood. I was a little kid during this time period that we're going to be talking about. My only really exposure to the area that was subject to urban renewal, later subject to urban renewal, was there was a butcher shop on Chapel Street that we went to. But I am going to ask for anybody really, and you'll be doing me a favor and doing all of us a favor as I go through. We can go through these slides as fast or as slow as you want. If anybody wants to give some information, I'm just going to, hopefully give some basic information. If anybody wants to add anything, please do. Certainly, if I'm mistaken, which is always possible, please jump in and provide some information. And that allows me to enjoy the night as well. And I learn things from people and find out things that I didn't know before. In case of any disputes, I've got my 1962 Hudson directory and my 1938 Hudson directory. So we can fall back. On those if we have to. Okay. So this is Chip's grocery store here, the prominent building. This is operated for a long time by the Chipkowski family. This is at the corner of Fleet and South Front. So you're looking at the northwest corner of Fleet. This is Fleet right here, and this is South Front. The river is back here. This is Franklin Square, which of course isn't there anymore, but Franklin Square was sort of a park or a playground. The earliest inhabitants of what's later became the city of Hudson, the first settlers of the city of Hudson, according to the application for the National Register application. The earliest inhabitants of the city of Hudson lived where Franklin Square is, built their houses. The first proprietors from Nantucket, built their houses there, and presumably the archaeological remains of the earliest buildings in Hudson are where Franklin Square was, which is directly north of Ferry Street. So Ferry Street, you can orient yourself if you look at the map. Ferry Street obviously is still there, the street that goes over to the boat launch. All of these buildings on Front Street from here, as far as you can see to the right of the picture, were brick buildings. And this is Penoyer Street right here, which of course isn't there anymore. All right, let's see here. Okay, so that's Penoyer Street. This is Glickman's Market. Mrs. Westerman, is that right? Before you? Okay. Anybody?
My dad's bar and grill was down next door to Chip's.
Okay, all right. Glickman's Market here, and the Glickman family lived right across the street on Union Street. The last house on Union Street, on the south side of Union Street, the last house there, the corner of Front and Union. So right across the street. This building here, according to the 1962 directory, was the location in 1962 of Anderson's funeral home. And you can see where the hearse went in right there. Okay, so now we're at the corner of Warren. Right, Warren. Right, Warren and South Front Street. This building here dated back to the late 1780s. That was a store that was operated by the first proprietors. The guy by the name of Jenkins, I believe, had a store there in the late 1780s, early 1790s. Front Street was really, for most of Hudson's history, Front Street was, along with Warren Street, was a commercial district. And it was, it was the entry to the city at the time, during the time when Hudson was a port, and then later on when the train came in, it was still the entry to the city. So first, number 1 South Front Street, number 3 South Front Street, and number 7 South Front Street are all brick buildings. There's, this is, you see this, so this is a brick early building. You see that wonderful doorway there, arch doorway. So this is going down Front Street. These are buildings that we just saw in the previous picture. And there's the last building there, number 9, I guess it would have been.
Right there.
Okay, this is the rear of the buildings on South Front Street from Chip's Market going uphill, is that right? Yeah. And there was an alley back there. There's an alley that was parallel to the Front Street. I don't know the name of it. It's written down somewhere. I forget.
Yeah,
Rock Alley.
Rock Alley. All right. All right. Who gets a star? Rock Alley. All right. That's great. Rock Alley. That's terrific. So I don't know. I don't. Some of these pictures were identified. They were taken. I believe they were taken by HUD photographers. And some of them were identified with locations, some of them were not identified. So hopefully there's some people here in the room that I'm going to talk to at some point after tonight, and we'll, some of these that might not have identification, we'll be able to come up with a better identification. Yeah, yes, a question.
Hi. That yellow brick building was owned by the Ann Murray and her husband. And they had the Polish American Club, National Alliance Club.
Right here.
Right there.
Yeah.
And they operated, during the war months, they operated a hot dog stand as a lean-to. They would hot dogs down the grills that smelled it all the way up.
So that's the
That yellow brick building.
That's the parade ground in the back there, overlooking the river.
Yeah.
And this is
Yeah.
this is Washington Coast.
So,
So let me just give you some context here. Let me give you some context here. In 1965, there was a comprehensive plan done by the city of Hudson, and the report back from the comprehensive plan was that the housing conditions in the city of Hudson in 1965, certain areas of the city of Hudson were very, very, very poor. And they identified the North Bay area and the South Bay area. And just to give you some data here, so let's see. This is in the total city, but most of the problematic areas, probably almost all of them, were in either what they call the South Bay District or the North Bay District. 377 housing units had no running hot water. 23 housing units had no water at all. 255 were without a bathroom or a shower. 2/5 of the housing unit in the city of Hudson were without safe and adequate heat. So 40% of the entire, of all the total number of housing units in the city of Hudson, 40% had inadequate heat. And of course, most of those were in the North Bay and the South Bay area, so the percentage in those areas without adequate heat would have been very, very high. Use of space heaters has been a major cause of fire in the city. According to this comprehensive plan, there were 157 housing units in 1960 that were being used to live in that they deemed to be not fit for human habitation. 157 housing units were uninhabitable, but were being used for, people were living in them. So in 1968, the HUD approved the urban renewal project in 1968. The way urban renewal worked, I've tried to teach myself about urban renewal, and I've spent a lot of time, probably 8 or 10 hours, looking at microfilm at the Columbia Green Library of the old Register Stars. So the federal government, in the case of Hudson, paid for 3/4 of the expense. So it's largely funded by the federal government, and then the last quarter, half of that is paid by the city, half of that is paid by the state of New York. But the proposal, the project, is driven by local people. So the local people are the local government and the local community are the people that generate the project. They make the recommendations, or they make an application to HUD, and HUD approves the project in 1968. As best as I could figure out, buildings started to come down in the fall of 1969. Between the fall of 1969 and the summer of 1971, the buildings that were part of the urban renewal area were torn down, and then construction started. Bliss Towers, I think construction started in both Bliss Towers and Hudson Terrace, which were really the two probably biggest pieces. They were not the only pieces. There were other pieces which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. But those buildings, those areas were under construction by the fall of 1971, and I think they were completed by 1973. The other thing that happened here, and Hudson it's very interesting, and it's occurred to me, and I'm not an expert on urban renewal history, but it seems that what they did in Hudson was maybe something that was not done in other areas. Hudson had a two-prong approach. One prong, and it was clearly there's a design. Urban design study from 1970, and it's clear what the city government and the city community, what their approach was. One approach was what they called clearance of the dilapidated housing, and the other one was historic preservation, which is, when I first saw that, I thought that they were sort of incompatible, but they're not incompatible. When you think about it, you're looking at sort of a big picture, and part of it is going to be clearance, and part of it, so you've got the same people, pretty much, the same group is making a presentation that this is how we're going to make the city of Hudson better, and we're going to do it both through, in two ways, through clearance and through historic preservation. In 1969, there were two applications to the National Historic Register. One of them was for the Front Street area, which we see here. And much of what we see that we're going to see here tonight is in a National Historic District. The other building, it's a very interesting part of this whole story. There was a single building, the General Worth Hotel, which was located between 2nd and 3rd, where Ackerman's parking lot is, right?
Yeah.
Was where the General Worth Hotel was. And the General Worth Hotel was a wonderful building. I think it goes back to 1835, something like that.
It does.
And people were very sorry to see it come down. It was approved in the fall of 1969. It was approved to be included, to be placed on the National Historic Register. And it was torn down in November of 1969. And, there was some public outcry, and I think the consensus was again, the city government and the people that were, in charge of the urban renewal, the proponents of urban renewal, they had this big building. It was in deteriorating shape, and they didn't have a use for it. And they tried to come up with uses, and they didn't have any, and so the building got torn down. And in fact, what you see here, which is kind of interesting, these buildings here, these buildings are on the National Historic Register. This application was accepted. These buildings were placed on the National Historic Register in 1970, and then by 1971 they were all torn down. And we'll evaluate that. We'll evaluate that, and we'll look at the big picture here, and by the end of the night we can make an assessment of what. Looking back from our perch of 50 years later. Okay, there's Washington Hose. We're going to look at it a few slides here. We're going to look at a street right back here.
No. This one now.
What was the name of it?
Marketplace.
Marketplace, or Market Street. Marketplace.
Yeah.
Very, very important area. This is a very important little area. It was very important in the history of Hudson. It was very important to the proprietors. When the proprietors laid out the city of Hudson, first of all, they kept the prominent land that was on the ridge between the two bays. Instead of developing that into housing lots, they kept that for the public, which is very, very nice of them. And we've benefited that. The people of Hudson have benefited from that for, 200 and something years now. This area here was also public, designated in the early, 1785 maps, whatever they are, it was designated as public space. And it was the marketplace. It was the marketplace for, think of like a farmer's market would be analogous to what we have in the 21st century. So that was the marketplace, designated public space. And then at some point in time, they developed the fire. They put the fire department there. I think that was Washington Hose was the first fire department in the city of Hudson. I think.
No, twice that.
Okay.
Edmonds.
Okay. All right. Okay. Good. So anyway, behind Washington Hose is Marketplace. and we'll look at Marketplace here a little more closely. This is Prison Alley.
Yeah.
This is the corner of Prison Alley and North Front Street, and the park it ends right here. And this building is one of my favorites. That building was a terrific, it had a turret on it, so it had like some Queen Anne. It must have been one of the prime real estate housing sites in the whole city. It was a beautiful building. I think it was probably Italianate, and somebody came on later and they put the Greek or the Queen Anne turret on it. If you want to see a good view of that building that doesn't exist anymore, Odds Against Tomorrow. Everybody's seen Odds Against Tomorrow. If you haven't seen Odds Against Tomorrow, that's your homework. Who hasn't seen Odds Against Tomorrow?
I tell everybody.
Odds Against Tomorrow was a,
They showed it here one time.
yeah, 1959, something like that. But anyway, I'm not going to, it's terrific, and it's a good movie, but what's good about it from our standpoint is it was shot in Hudson, and there's a lot of, have you seen Odds Against Tomorrow? Yeah. There's a lot of Main Street, there's a lot of shots on Main Street, there's a, they rob a bank on South 6th Street. They rob a bank on South 6th Street, and there's, you see, and then they end up down at the park, and they're having, I forget who they were, but two of the characters are having a conversation, and that building is right in the background, so you get a good, you get a good look at it. And this is Chapel, the corner of Chapel and North Front. Chapel is gone, and Chapel is the extension of Long Alley. Is that right?
Yep.
Is that the right? Yes. Okay. Good. And then way down here, you can see it a little bit. There's the old mill.
Oh, the mill, yep.
That was there up until, what, 15 years ago, 20 years ago? I don't know. Time goes by. It's Marketplace, and according to my 1938 directory, in 1938, Mrs. Frances Abbottabble ran a market right here, and her family lived upstairs. And what do you think this building is with these?
That's the original
Mount Carmel's church.
Synagogue.
In 1938, it was a synagogue. Is that where Mount Carmel started?
That was Mount
Mount Carmel was next door.
I read somewhere Mount Carmel was on North Front. No?
No, Marketplace.
Okay, all right. But in 1938, this was a synagogue. I guess they moved in later, right? Now, Mount Carmel, I looked at this the other day. I think Mount Carmel was built in 1931. So if it was...
No, the first church was built a lot earlier than that.
Yeah, but the Mount Carmel, our Mount Carmel was, I think, built in 1931.
Yes, it was. Yep.
So you think this was the Catholic Church before it was the synagogue?
Yes, definitely.
No,
Okay.
no, the Catholic Church was next door to the synagogue.
Okay. Not pictured.
I got a picture.
Not in this picture.
No,
Okay. Not on North Front Street? Okay.
no, it's in Market Square.
Okay. All right.
Marketplace.
This is 11 Marketplace. There's no higher numbers.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming this was at the corner of Marketplace and Prison Alley. Yeah, this is parallel, folks. This is parallel to Front Street. This is directly behind Washington Hose, parallel to Front Street. So Prison Alley is over here, and Warren, right? Because it would be over here. West Warren. Okay. I'd like to see, Sal, your picture of Mount Carmel.
What's that?
Sal, Sal's not listening. Mount Carmel, you have an old picture of Mount Carmel, the first Mount Carmel.
It
Yes,
was a wooden building.
Okay,
I saw that.
Oh, yeah?
all right. That's a building on Promenade Hill there. Okay. This is the Waldron House. And the Waldron House was built around 1825. It was one of the early buildings that was demolished. It was demolished in October of 1969.
There was a hotel.
Yeah, that was a hotel. So,
We're on the other side.
now, so these buildings you see here to the right are gone, and this is, that was the location of, obviously that block is the only piece of Warren Street that was part of that and the general work, which was a little, isolated demolition. But the only stretch of Warren Street that was cleared was the south side of First to Front Street. One of the things that's unique, I think, and we're familiar with what's happened in other places, Newburgh, Kingston, Amsterdam, Albany, all these places were subject of urban renewal. I think one of the things that was different about Hudson, and this was explained to me, or was emphasized to me, there's a professor at SUNY Albany who was very kind and spent some time with me over the phone, and he what he explained was urban renewal, I think, started in 1949. I think it was called the Fair Housing Act. And the idea was that we were going to upgrade, we were going to take people who were living in dilapidated housing circumstances, and we were going to give them new housing. Over time, what happened is people started to use urban renewal for economic development. And what they thought they would do is, and this happened, I think, in many instances, they had this federal money available to them. They were going to take the old part of their city, and they were going to knock it all down, and then they were going to build fresh, and it was going to be economic development, and it was going to be terrific. Well, Newburgh, if you've been down to Newburgh, they took out one of the major commercial districts of Newburgh, and there's nothing there. It's the whole hillside of Newburgh, from the river up to the top of the hill. Nobody came. There was no economic development that took place. If anybody's ever been in Amsterdam, what happened in Amsterdam is horrific. Amsterdam, which is a city which is much bigger than our city, there is about 2 blocks left of downtown, and it's totally surrounded by acres and acres and acres of parking lot. It's their whole city was erased, and nothing ever came, and that was just due to the economic conditions, the nationwide economic conditions. People didn't invest in cities back then. So we have all these terrible examples of urban renewal, and urban renewal has really, people have a general sense of urban renewal as a great tragedy, one of the great tragedies in American history. In Hudson, we did something very different. We took, well, I can't take any credit for it, but we identified terrible housing the terrible housing was removed. New housing, brand new housing was put up. The only part of Warren Street that was disturbed, and the only small, attempt at economic development was that block on between First and Front Street on the south side of Warren Street. And the thinking was that that would be a little commercial district for all the new housing that was, developed as an adjunct to that. So, that area there's a little, whatever you call it, a little plaza. It obviously has been underutilized, I think probably the whole time, for the last 50 years. I don't know if it's ever really became a little commercial hub the way that the people envisioned. But that was really, that's really the only part of the vision that was not, that did not come to fruition. This is, I'm not sure where this is, but this is, yeah, I'm not sure. Some of the slides, they just said, alley, and they didn't tell me where it was. But this is, this building here had been on fire, and it was burned. It suffered very heavy damage, and yet it stood there. So they eradicated that type of thing. There were 23 parcels, I think, that were owned by the city that were turned over to the Urban Renewal Agency, meaning the way that the city ended up with them is the people, the landowners did not pay their taxes, so that these parcels had no value, and we know they had no value because the city ended up as the landowner because of delinquent taxes. So those are 23 parcels, which was I think about 15% of all the parcels that they acquired in order to make all this happen. This is, I just figured this out last night. I'm going to propose to you that this is what I call Candy Lane here. So this is, let's see, what is that? Columbia.
You can see the Sacred Heart Church in the background.
Is that a church?
Yeah,
So what is that big brick building?
I have no idea.
Not Candyland.
It's not Candy Lane.
Okay, I'll tell you why I think that, but that's fine. If it's not Candy Lane, that's fine. But what is it?
Excuse me, Candy Lane is
Part of the brewery?
The Candy Lane used to be the mushroom
It's
factory.
the old, it's Providence Hall. It's a mushroom factory
Yeah, Second, it's at the corner of Second and Columbia.
on Columbia.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
But
Um,
that's not it. That's not it.
Yeah, I didn't think it was. I think, and I'll tell you why I say that, but, I'm happy if somebody disputes that, but then we have to figure out what that big brick, 2 or 3 story brick building is.
You can see fires.
Don't know where this is. The photographer, whoever took these pictures, he or she was a wonderful photographer. There's really some, that's a very handsome picture there. There's some nice qualities to it. What has happened here in Hudson over the period of time, this is a good example. These buildings got added on to. They got added on to, and if you look at the numbers in 1930, the 1930 census, there were, in the city of Hudson, the population of the city of Hudson in 1930 was between 12 and 13,000 people. The population in 2020, I believe, it was something like 5,900 people, 6,000 people. So there were, in the same area, the exact same area, there were shoehorned in more than twice the number of people in Hudson than live in Hudson today. So what you see is, and especially in the North Bay area was even, more of a problem than the South Bay area. But what you see in those areas was the crowding and these housing units that were cobbled onto earlier buildings, and you could see how it happened that people did not have adequate heat and adequate water and so on. I'm not sure where that is. This building is not there anymore. Does anybody know what happened to that?
Which
It was condemned.
Yeah, it was torn down.
Yeah.
Condemned.
Okay, all right. So it's interesting that that there were within these pictures of this clearance, all of this clearance, you had these wonderful pictures of some of the finest buildings in
The picture
Hudson.
before that was the Cyrus Curtis House. He was a sea captain. He was also a mayor of Hudson, New York. There's a cannon still there in the front yard.
Joe. Marie Peace's house too.
And one of the components of the historic preservation leg of this whole thing of urban renewal was a reinvestment in the sidewalks, a reinvestment in the lighting. There were I think 20 facades on Lower Warren Street that were rehabilitated or were enhanced as a result of urban renewal. So much of what we enjoy today, especially about Lower Warren Street, is goes back to the big picture approach that was taken back 50 years ago. Before I got here tonight, I just drove around and I was looking at things, and there were all kinds of people walking up and down Warren Street, and they're just looking at buildings. And you guys who live in Hudson must see that all the time. So we did something, very, very well here when we took that federal money and we invested in historic preservation.
Sal, that was your neighborhood.
This, I think, is Prison Alley. This is I think Front Street goes right in here, and then you go up the hill there. I think that's where that is. I'm not sure about that. So, 176 buildings were removed. They cleared roughly 85 acres. 176 buildings were removed, which contained 286 dwelling units. In those 286 dwelling units, there were about 850 people who were displaced and found new homes. You see the overcrowding, the cobbled on, especially on the alley side of some of these buildings, some of these streets, the cobbled together sort of conditions here. This house, I think, is the house we were looking at a few minutes ago. That's the back, we were looking at the back side, and one of the reasons I say that, the house is the same color. This is what I'm calling Candy Lane.
Well, it was a mushroom
in
factory.
1979. And the building was the same color, and there's also a chimney that had a little, little flue, clay flue, which is what you see here. So
No, you're right, you're right.
I'd like to be corrected, but I think that's, so look at that. I mean, that's a terrific building, Greek revival from, 1825, something like that. And this is 2nd Street, right?
Yes.
And Mount Carmel is back, the new Mount Carmel, or the old Mount, the old Mount Carmel is back there.
Yeah.
Okay, this is, yeah, let me go back here. So these are the only two pictures that were identified as Chapel Street.
Right, that's where you, those gardens were right there.
So Chapel Street is gone. There's nothing left of Chapel Street. I'm going to guess that this is probably the back side of the north side of Chapel Street, since we're looking uphill towards those buildings.
Yeah, they will all have hills, like the garden is down at the bottom of the hill.
See, that's
Ours
There's a
wasn't
young
that
man
bad.
right there.
Ours was all
the
yellow.
nice, yeah, it's nice.
Trying to think of how far was that, now how to be further down.
That's on State Street.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great building. I mean, look how, it's enormous. And State Street was, State Street from, let's see, from First Street west was cleared on both sides, right? Have I got that right?
Yeah.
And there was a slaughterhouse there.
Yes.
On State Street.
On State Street, the north side of State Street, not within my memory, but
I don't
Okay.
know, no, it wasn't historic. Cookerstein at the slaughterhouse.
this is West State Street.
That's the Carr's house.
Yeah,
That was the Carr family. The son just passed away, Hazel Carr.
Really? I went to school with a couple of them. Joe Carr isn't here by any chance, is he?
That was his family's house. That was
Yeah.
his family's house.
Yeah. And his mother was on the Urban Renewal Commission with Mr. Cohen, Mrs. Carr. West State, right? West State Street. I don't know where that is. That is, that's, the North Bay is up here, is right up here. So Shantytown, or whatever you call it, right, is up here, is up in here, right? And that's the, so we're looking west.
Yeah.
That's the mill.
The shanties are way behind that. To the right there. It was the Hudson Knitting Mills.
Yeah, it was owned by the Rose family.
Okay. All right, and the North Bay is up here, it's to the right of the frame, isn't it? No?
To the left.
To the left.
To the left.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Where the factory is, the shanties are there, and the bay's right behind the shanty.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time there.
Okay.
Barn there. Slaughterhouse, remember that? That was original cattle.
Okay, we're winding down here, actually. The slide said New Street.
Yeah.
Going down the hill, right? New Street goes down the hill to the, like, McCall's Refrigeration down that way. Isn't that New Street? Foster's.
Yeah.
And the sewage treatment plant, I think, was built with, I might be wrong, I couldn't, if I had more time, I would have spent more time with the microfilm, but it's very time consuming. But I'm assuming the sewer treatment plant was built with as part of this. I don't know the date. Does anybody know the date of the sewer treatment plant? But the 1965 comprehensive plan identifies that everybody's sewer just ran into North Bay and South Bay.
It was on Dock Street.
So, and New Street was reconfigured as a result of all this. So that is Hudson Terrace, right? Being constructed. So, North Front Street. Bliss Towers. Bliss Towers was named after Dr. Roger Bliss.
He was police commissioner.
Dr. Roger Bliss was the police commissioner for a while, from 1966 to 1971. He was the chairman of the Hudson Housing Authority, and he was a much beloved figure in Hudson. I saw his notice. He retired from the chairmanship of the Hudson Housing Authority and his practice, his medical practice, on June 1st, 1971. All the hard work for the Housing Authority had already been done by then. So the only thing that was left, construction was starting on Bliss Towers, so he thought that that was a good time for him to depart. He had been in practice with his wife in Hudson since 1933, and he delivered, I saw the article in the Register Star, he delivered 6,700 babies. Raise your hand if you were delivered by Dr. Bliss or you had a child delivered by Dr. Bliss.
Oh my God.
6,700 babies. So, he lived to be 91 years old. And this is what? Yeah, Candy Lane. Right.
Factory first.
Many years before that, there was Union Mills. It was a textile mill.
Yep.
They built denim clothes.
This is the bridge that goes down to the boat launch. What is this building here?
The pump house, Hudson Pump House,
Originally, yeah.
originally.
Then it was DPW.
DPW buildings.
Pump water out of the river, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that was removed. This is you know, we've made a loop here. We started on Fleet Street and we went up Front Street. We made a big loop. One of the great success stories of the urban renewal was the boat launch. So
That's where the other shanty town used to be before they took over the shanty.
okay, all right. So this is my last. We're going to end with the Catskill Mountains and the lighthouse there. So I want to suggest to you that the people that were planning urban renewal in Hudson and responsible for urban renewal, Mr. Kowick and Dr. Bliss, and you know, the people on the city council and the other people that were involved. You know, urban renewal turned out differently for Hudson than it did in a lot of other places. In a lot of other places, it was just a bad experience. I want to suggest that we can consider, and this is if we want to, you know, I'll open this up to discussion. But I think my thesis is that when you look at this on the whole. And you look at the terrible, dilapidated, the problems that were here in Hudson, the housing problems, and that was there were tremendous strides made. The people that planned this. They went in and they were true to the spirit of what urban renewal was supposed to be, which is supposed to correct people's housing problems. It did not turn into a misguided tool for economic development. There were housing that was cleared, housing went up. I mean, that's unusual. If you look at my examples of Amsterdam and Newburgh, where they have great big spaces that, used to be the downtown of the city. We don't have that. The bad housing went down, the new housing went up. We don't have lots of parking lots where the city of Hudson housing used to exist. And the historic preservation aspect of it was very, very important. Some places, Albany, Poughkeepsie, North Adams, Massachusetts, they have the big highway goes right through their downtown. We don't have that here. So we escaped many of the problems that other cities, sustained. Yes?
How many units were built after 170, 286 were taken down?
Good question. I think Bliss Towers, I think there's 135 units, or at least that's the number that I saw in in the Register Star article. So Bliss Towers, 135 units, and Hudson Terrace, I want to say 168. So that's, how much is that? 300 something?
Yeah.
300 units. So.
It's 120 units in Bliss Towers and 15 in the low rise.
Okay.
That makes up the 135.
Okay. Yes?
First of all, thank you for the presentation. This was like extraordinarily important at all times. Second of all, I'm also very humbled by the amount of knowledge and wisdom in the room. It's so cool to see how many people are participating in this whole experience. One of the things I think is really interesting to think about is how does this actually translate to current policy prescriptions, right? And we're facing one of those coming around the corner in terms of the potential redevelopment of Bliss Towers. I'm not proffering my own opinion on this issue, but there are a lot of people who've been in this community for years and years and years, and I'd love to hear some people's perspectives of what they want to see there.
Is Bliss Towers at the end of its usefulness? Is that the thinking?
That's the general conclusion.
It's 50 years old.
Yeah.
And to respond to that, I think it would be great to hear from Reverend Frost, who's an expert on the history of this community as well. I don't mean to call you out, Reverend Frost. Here's the conversation. But as it pertains to the housing, and Reverend Frost, I was hoping that you might be able to speak to some of what you brought up around this crossroads that we're at now as well, around potentially losing Bliss Towers. And I think that, in seeing this, we see a history where housing was taken away and housing was replaced. But what has happened since then, and especially in the last 10 years, is housing just being taken away and it's not being replaced. And so I'm curious what happened to those 800 people who got displaced temporarily and they all came back. But I think there's a huge risk in our community right now of families being pushed out and never coming back. And the fabric of our city is being permanently disrupted and permanently harmed. And so I'm interested in your perspective on how this was a positive for the community. But I've learned so much from you, Reverend Frost, and I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
I don't know what to say. I was born, bred, and raised in Hudson. And as you walk and as you showed all that was on that screen, I walk that every day. That's my home. Okay, when I look at Providence Hall, I see the mushroom factory. I see Candy Lane. When I look over at the high rise, I see Chapel Street running right down the middle, right through the middle of the of the high rise. And I think that a lot of times I see a lot of people coming in to our community and trying to mold and to shape it and make it theirs, but while they're molding it, they're squeezing us out. And I'm scared. It happened with urban renewal, and it looks like it's happening again. Okay, I had a church, 241 Columbia Street. It was the original, as far as I know, it was the original Shiloh Baptist Church. I tried to get it designated as a historical site. Excuse my ignorance, it didn't happen. I'm looking out here, and like I gotta say, I love you all, but where were you 50 years ago when I was walking the street? I see you as coming in saying, oh, this is nice, and it's like moving into a new house where you take stuff and you put, oh, we don't need that, we don't need this, oh, we need this or we need that. Meanwhile, here I am. It's my house. What's wrong with that picture? We have to be sensitive. We have to be sensitive to where we were, to where we are, to where we're going. And because all too often, we have people coming in, as long as they can move things, until the point where they get tired and they move out. I have a lot of people in Hudson right now that are afraid, don't know what's going to happen. I got people who could have probably filled this building 10 times over, but they're going to wait. They're going to wait till everything happens when the door is shut, and they're shut out of it. It's important that we include them. Now, I don't know how we're going to do that, but I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here because this is my history. I lived it. 70 years I was here. And like, what can I say? I'm a part of it. It's a part of me. So when you rustle and tussle, you're moving me. And I'm a big man. Okay?
You said it well.
God bless you.
Hello, how are you? I'm Jeff Dotson, and I'm not from Hudson, but I am the new executive director of the Housing Authority. And I can tell you that it is not our intention to displace people. That's not my vision. I grew up in public housing myself in Newark, New Jersey, where properties were built there, started being built in 1940. At the edge of town, where it was a direct response to the Depression and people needed places to live. So coming to see housing and see how there's a concentration of poverty in one area, we're trying to eliminate that. I will not see people displaced. We want to make sure that the deconcentration of poverty happens. People have other places to live, and there's a bunch of places in Hudson that I've seen myself that is not being utilized. But we want to make housing look more like what is here now, what some of the nice buildings that we saw, and give people the opportunity to live, to answer your question, sir. So that's not my intention. It's not just a job for me, it's in my heart. And you know, I can see that, as you just stated, this urban renewal didn't affect this town like it's affected other towns, and that's a good thing. But like Reverend Cross said, we need the community to be involved. I've only been here 3 months, and I did a survey and have some results for it. And asked people, like, what do you want? You know, what do you want it to look like? You know, and if you look at the whole town, you can see bliss everywhere you go. That's the tallest building in the city here. Again, we want to make it look. We want the housing now to look, coming to look like what's already here, so it can match.
Did I see Judge Cohen? He had his hand up. Is he?
Well, he did, but unfortunately, we had dinner plans, so we had to go pick him up.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Can I just say something, though? I'm
I'm Art Cohen's daughter, and I lived in the house where my parents were never home because they loved this town. My mother lived here her entire life, except when she lived in the city after college. She met my dad, and he was from the city, and they ended up here because they loved it here. They had so many grandchildren grow up here. My son grew up here. You grew up here. The intent was not to displace people. The intent was to take people who are living in conditions that none of us would want to live in, and none of us should have to live in. And they worked really hard, but it didn't feel like work for them. We didn't get to see our parents a lot because they were trying to revitalize the city. And it wasn't the business district. And by the way, my parents had 2 businesses in the city. It was not a selfish, it was not a promotional thing from them. Your father had a major business in the city. It was about residents. It was about people's living conditions. And that's what they wanted. That was their dream. They worked their entire lives for that in many different ways. And many of you know them through community service. So I do understand what you're saying about being displaced. And I'm sure they were out of those 300 and something people. Nobody likes change. But they were getting, what I hope they finally understood, that they were finally living with running water and got to be in the neighborhoods that they wanted to be in, is my hope. I was little, and so I don't really know all of the things, but I know that everybody who worked on that, it was totally volunteer, and it was out of the goodness of their heart. And I know there's people sitting in here that also had family members that helped. And I have to say that, and I thank you, Ted, for bringing that out. The intention was always good. The intention was to improve people's lives in this city. And
I want to just add, and yeah, just let me just say one thing. I'll give you one more fun fact here. 55% of the people who were removed from their housing ended up in single-family houses, owned their own single-family houses. So there was a combination of the money that they were given for their house that they, that HUD gave them for their house, and they got a stipend on top of that. So 55% of the people that were, displaced ended up in owning single-family houses. Yeah, Reverend, and then somebody else here had their hand up.
I just want to say one thing. Bless your family, okay? Because the way you said it, the way it started out was the way it was. It was good. Okay, your mother and father and my family have a personal history. Okay, but somewhere in between there and here, something happened. Something happened along the way. It looks like right now, I'm afraid it's happening again. Okay? God bless you. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes, yeah.
Well, to Joan and that, her family did good because they had the town fair. They used to let us always put stuff on layaway. The family did all that stuff. That was good. But if you notice, most of these pictures were all South Front Street. That's where all the junkie houses were. They didn't do much on the north side where I live, and them houses were gorgeous houses. But they don't show all them. And the people down on North Front, they had heat, water, and all that stuff, and they project this as that. Both sides were like, didn't have water, didn't have heat, but the north side was the good side. That had all the beautiful houses down there. And West State Street also. I mean, our house wasn't, but the ones up from there were awesome houses, nice houses. That's what I got upset. And then they tell the people that they help people find other places. They didn't help nobody find other places, not us. And that people that owned their house, Art Myers was the longest holdout that wanted more money for his house because they didn't give much money to anybody for their houses. And that was a sad part about it. I mean, you can look at the good part because what your father did and made that the way it is, I understand that. But a whole lot of people got disrupted because Front Street on North Front was a family. We had Italian, blacks, Polish, Italian, we had everybody there. And it was a unique part of town because we all got along together. We didn't have no disruption because you're Irish, you're Polish, you're what's called. We did well on Front Street. The greatest thing that came out of that, for me, we got moved up to State Street, and I met, which was my future wife, and we've been together for 50 years.
So if anyone else has any comments, and also we have 2 other lectures on urban renewal that have been recorded, one by Peter Chipkowski and one by Carl Whitbeck, that are on our YouTube channel. The links are on our website. And I would highly recommend that you look at those videos. They're very informative also, and especially in terms of some of the comments that have been made. I want to thank Ted so much for this